I'm Dr. R. Craig Hogan, President of the Afterlife Research and Education Institute. One of the questions we're very often asked is there judgment, condemnation, and punishment in the next life? Society has raised us to feel people must be judged, condemned, and punished if they do things society disapproves of. We place offenders in prison to deter others from performing the offending action. The thought that someone could do bad things and not be held accountable for them is entirely unacceptable in our culture. They must pay. This need for judgment, condemnation, and punishment is woven into the fabric of our society. Schools have time-out punishment, very much like a prison. Children must sit in a corner until they repent. At home, if a child misbehaves, the parent exclaims, "Go to your room. Come out when you can behave." Children are given failing grades if they don't perform up to standards. Taxpayers are fined if their taxes are not correct. Our society is infused with judgment, condemnation, and punishment. There are police, judges, prisons, prison guards, probation officers, and all manner of support infrastructure in a justice system costing billions of dollars to judge, condemn, and punish people. The Christian religion that has so strongly influenced Western society adopted judgment, condemnation, and punishment as its central tenets. If a person believes Yeshua or Jesus is God, that person is saved. But to make the salvation meaningful, the person must be saved from something. So the church developed the hell myth in the first centuries after Yeshua's departure. Judgment, condemnation, and punishment became the foundations of the Christian religion. If you don't believe Jesus is God, you will be judged, condemned, and punished in a hell of everlasting torment. Belief in the hell myth is so pervasive that a 2014 Roper poll found 67% of those surveyed still believe hell exists. But it was all a fabrication by the church. There never was a hell. Judgment, condemnation, and punishment are integral to our society. That carries through to people's common beliefs about the life after this life. There must be judgment, condemnation, and punishment for living wrong lives and doing bad deeds, most people believe. This is a mistaken belief. We have learned from all the residents of the life after this life who have spoken to us through mediums that there is no judgment, no condemnation, and no punishment for wrong deeds. That doesn't sit well with many people because we have been acculturated to believe that there must be judgment, condemnation, and punishment for offenses in the next life. Invariably, people point to Adolf Hitler as an example of someone whose misdeeds must not go unpunished. How could Hitler get away with his atrocities? He must be punished in the next life. However, understanding our place in eternity and the growth of every individual into becoming more loving and compassionate requires a different perspective. The first understanding we must have is that our universal intelligence, the source or God, is entirely loving, with no judgment, condemnation, or punishment in any form. It isn't that our universal intelligence chooses to be loving and to suppress judgment, condemnation, and punishment. There is no form of judgment, condemnation, or desire to punish in our universal intelligence to be suppressed. Our universal intelligence is pure, untainted love, with no qualifications or conditions. People in near-death experiences describe the profound, overwhelming love that envelops them when they are separated from the physical realm and are fully present with God. In our universal intelligence relationship with us, there is no judgment, condemnation, or punishment. Instead, we are being nurtured and guided into growing to be increasingly loving and compassionate through our eternal lives. Everyone is at some stage of growth, even a despot responsible for the suffering and death of millions of people. Our universal intelligence knows that eventually all people will evolve to be unconditionally loving, like our universal intellect that is the basis of our being. The second understanding we must have is that all people are at some stage of becoming loving and compassionate. Some people are like the Ugly Duckling in a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. In the story, a mother duck sits on her nest of 6 eggs until they hatch. Eventually, 5 cute, fuzzy yellow ducklings are hatched. The 6th egg is slow to hatch and larger than the others. When it hatches, what emerges is a larger, ungainly creature that is gray, not pretty duckling yellow. And this creature wobbles when it walks. The ugly duckling is ridiculed and rejected. However, this ugly duckling is actually a swan chick that matures to becoming a beautiful, graceful swan. The state of being an ugly duckling or a beautiful swan is analogous to a person's level of spiritual growth. Every person is at some stage of growth toward becoming loving, compassionate, kind, and other-centered. Some people are now antisocial, without a conscience, cruel, self-absorbed, and greedy. They are ugly ducklings. Others are loving, giving, kind, compassionate, and other-centered. They have grown into beautiful swans. The ugly ducklings and the swans are not different creatures. Both are swans at some stage in their development. All ugly ducklings will eventually become beautiful swans during their continuous growth. All people, regardless of their present states, will become loving, compassionate, kind, and other-centered. Our perspective is limited to a short sliver of our eternal existence, this brief moment on earth. What we see during this short time is where people are in their development now. All people will continue to grow for millennia, so even the most deplorable individuals will eventually become loving, compassionate people, including Adolf Hitler. Judging, condemning, and punishing the ugly duckling will not force it into becoming a beautiful swan it will eventually become. People's maturation must happen in its own time, through its own natural processes, during an eternity of growth in the capacity to love and feel compassion. That isn't to say we allow people who are antisocial, cruel, and violent to act without consequences during this time at Earth School. People who are as of yet unable to adjust their mental state and activities to be loving and other-centered, who are cruel, sadistic, scofflaws, without conscience, must receive judgment and punishment when they transgress to deter such behavior in society. Cruel despots, serial killers, child abusers, and all of those in humanity who engage in antisocial acts must be judged and punished during this time on earth. That is part of the Earth School experience. However, judgment and punishment are relevant only to Earth School, not to our lives in eternity. When we leave behind all the baggage of Earth School and transition to the life after this life, there will be no judgment, condemnation, or punishment for actions we performed in Earth School. There are life reviews in which we will relive important points in our lives, feeling all the joy, frustration, anger, and grief felt then, at the time with the same intensity. The critical component of the experience is that we also feel the feelings of those involved in the situation as deeply as we feel our own feelings. We will live the experiences through their feelings and thoughts as they were when the events happened. As we do so, we will learn how our actions have affected other people. We will become more compassionate and loving because of what we learn about the effects of our actions on others. Those are the lessons in a life review. The life review is not a judgment, condemnation, or punishment. It is entirely to help us grow in love and compassion. No one judges us. We judge ourselves. And so we are all swans. Some of us are at an immature state of development that we see now as ugly ducklings. But when our universal intelligence looks at all of us, it sees only beautiful white swans with broad wings and graceful necks, never anything else. We can be assured that in the life after this life, we will not be judged, condemned, or punished. We will feel only acceptance and unconditional love.